That was the second intifada. I was 24. I was a well-educated adult. Even before I watched those 59 seconds on Yahoo News, her sufferance was not unknown to me. And yet I felt no compulsion to concern myself beyond a few moments over a few days with Palestine. But 25 years later, I find myself struggling to incite my two teenagers to feel something, anything, of the goal that has worsened me against the whole world since October 7th. Well, it serves me right. This rage, powered by a keener and keener sense of ineptitude in the face of mass-scale vulgarity of perception and reality, hasn't only hit me. Those who welcome you all here today to Dear Palestine are all one in fury. And we are so grateful to you for coming. Two, to speak on the unspeakable as parents first. To pay Palestine due deference as the educated and privileged in society should. To mark Palestine as both origin and apex of Western imperialism's continuing crimes against indigenous peoples of the world, including our own government's vested interests and subsequent crimes against its own indigenous, to demand avenues and answers, to push back, to boycott, to divest, to ensure that Generation Z and Alpha feel less compromised and only more humanized for raising their collective consciousness earlier than we did, or at least I did. So now or never is our first in hopefully a series of letters of unwavering respect and love, but first, allegiance. Because no one is free until Palestine is free, from the river to the sea. I'm going to pause for the azan. First one is finished, so it's okay. As long as We'll just wait for the second or the third to finish, just so my voice carries to the camera. All right, I'm told this will continue for quite a while, so I'm going to resume and I'll speak louder. I don't think anyone here needs an introduction to our two panelists this evening. Nevertheless, first, our moderator. Omar Shahid Hamid's father, a respected bureaucrat, was murdered in 1997 by a notorious hitman in the city he still serves. Omar subsequently joined the police and has served as a senior counter-terrorism police officer in Karachi. He has survived several attempts on his life, investigated an international murder of a journalist, and had his offices blown up by the Taliban. Omar is also a prolific writer, having authored 6 books of fiction that each provide an unapologetic representation of Karachi's sinister side: political corruption, contract killers, crooked cops, and unflinching portraits of this city's toxic elitism and estranged communities. And now, about our keynote speaker. Born in Kabul, Fatima Bhutto spent her first years stateless. She is daughter to the late elected Member of Parliament Murtaza Bhutto, who was killed along with 6 associates in a police encounter during the premiership of his sister Benazir Bhutto. She is granddaughter to Pakistan's former president and prime minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Fatima graduated from Columbia University, majoring in Middle Eastern languages and cultures, and from the School of Oriental and African Studies with a master's in South Asian government and politics, where she wrote a dissertation on the resistance movement in Pakistan. Her first book, Whispers of the Desert, a collection of poetry, was published in 1997 when Fatima was only 15. 8:50 a.m., 8th October 2005 is a collection of first-hand accounts from survivors of the 2005 earthquake in Pakistan. Songs of Blood and Sword, published in 2010, is her achingly unpretentious memoir. Her publications in fiction include The Shadow of the Crescent Moon and The Runaways. Both continue to receive critical acclaim. Fatima has written for the Pakistani periodicals Jang and The News. Between 2006 and 2008, she covered the Israeli invasion and war with Lebanon from Lebanon, and also reported from Iran and Cuba. Her columns have appeared in The New Statesman, Daily Beast, The Guardian, and The Caravan magazine. At present, Fatima mentors South Asian writers as the head of climate projects at the South Asia Speaks Literary Fellowship. Fatima happily loads Facebook. She is not, no, never will be, a member. And now, without further delay, because it is now or never, over to you, Omar.
Thank you, Tanya. I hope all of you can hear me. Slight housekeeping issue. Fatma will be joining. Sorry. दे दो. चल गया? Hello. 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 Thank you. As I was saying, Slight housekeeping issue. Fatma is showing her sick child at the doctor's and will be joining us in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of Dear Palestine for putting together this event, very important event. And as Tanya mentioned before me,
We did a track through between the Israelis and the Arab world CEOs, and there were Palestinians as well. So we continued for almost 4 years, and that gave me unique insight into the Israeli society as well. A lot of my friends today are from Israel. So what I thought was, Umar had asked me, so I'm going to give a few insights firsthand on how I see. We all know Gaza, genocide, terrible, and we should condemn it, etc., etc. But then the question is, how do we go forward from here, right? So BDS. So BDS till to date has not really impacted financially. Israeli economy has not gone bankrupt because of the boycott. The governments, including Muslim governments, do not support officially. It's a civil society movement, and it continues to be.
I mean, for our younger members of the audience, can you just kind of explain a little bit what you mean by BDS?
BDS is boycott, divest, and the S stood for sanctions.
Sanctions, yeah.
Right? So it is a civil society movement to raise the voice against the occupation in the West Bank, Gaza. Right? And it's not an anti-Semitic movement. It doesn't really talk about, vilifying the Jewish communities as such. It is a civil society movement. It has a very secular agenda to it. And so what it really did was, look, before October 7th, let's not forget, the Abrahamic Accords was to expand. And there was a lot of talk between Krishna going and doing the track tour and eventually getting the Saudi Arabia, Saudi and other governments, UAE had already recognized Israel. And the central conflict, the central position of the Arab world and the Muslim world was, we will not recognize Israel till they solve the Palestinian. So the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, felt that we are being relegated to the dustbin of history once when all other Arab and Muslim countries recognize Israel. Then there is no incentive for Israel ever to recognize or give a two-state solution to the Palestinians. So what BDS really did was it actually held companies to account, especially in the occupied territories. It kept the Palestinian issue alive. We must recall that before October 7, the Palestinian issue was almost dead. This is the reality. No one spoke about it. No Muslim government spoke about it. OIC, it was a completely, on the sideline. It was literally in the parking lot. October 7th, in my opinion, the Gaza genocide, what it really did was it failed. Tactically, it was a success. Strategically, it was failure. Number one, the Israelis did not wanted to kill the Palestinians. They wanted to do ethnic cleansing. They wanted that land, right? So if you see from that point of view, they failed. The Palestinians did not leave Gaza, period. They were in terrible conditions. They tried everything. So water lines, electricity lines, schools, universities were completely wiped out. This wasn't done randomly. There was a method to this madness to completely destroy, flatten the thing so it becomes unlivable. And they were hoping and praying that the Palestinians would leave. They did not leave. They said, we're going to die. If anything, the French president, when he went to Egypt, they met the Palestinians in hospitals there. They said, how can we help you? They said, help us to go back to Gaza. So that was the determination of the Palestinian people, and hence the Gaza genocide really failed. The second thing was the Zionist narrative. It was so strong. I would speak in the US about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and people would say, where have these Palestinians come from? And it would be shocking that the discourse there was that the Palestinians are the occupiers. Jews have been there since 2,000 years plus. It's these Palestinians. Where have they come from? Why don't they go back to the Arab lands, right? That was it. And of course, the power of the Zionist lobby was very, very strong. But post-Gaza genocide, this narrative is broken, it's shattered, right? So strategically, it's been a victory for the Palestinians. Tactically, it's been a huge, at a huge cost. Now, going forward, look, you cannot wish Israel, it will not get wiped out. It's a very strong country, and somehow we need to engage, okay? And you can't wish your problems away. So how do you engage? Number one, I think you need to do conversation across the aisle. Now, I hear a lot of people who say this is a Jewish conspiracy, and I am absolutely opposed to that. Remember, 80% of the Jews living in America actually support this two-state solution. The young Jews, all right, been rebellious, okay? And the reason for that was, if you see the 60, 65 plus Jewish communities, their memory is the Holocaust and the 1967 war. So they all said, we are the victims. The young people see the Gaza genocide, and their memory is now the Gaza genocide. So there's a huge conflict going on within the Jewish community amongst the young and the older, okay? So to say this is a Jewish conspiracy actually does a disservice to the Palestinian cause, because it is actually a racist remark, okay? You cannot pass sweeping statements against a people of a certain religion or community. What it is a Zionist occupying, ethno-occupier state. And the struggle is against that, not a community of Jews.
In fact, I'll interject over here that would you say that the increasingly radical nature of the government in Israel, the way it's set up, the way the coalition is set up, has meant that essentially fundamentalist parties have come to power, and it's almost like we talk about the Taliban government in Afghanistan, but fundamentally it's like a Jewish Taliban government right now.
Right. So I don't entirely agree, because that's not the full picture. Mm-hmm. We think this is Bibi Netanyahu or Smotrich or Ben Gvir issue. No, it is not. If you do the survey, 60% of the Israeli public said we are not bombing Gaza enough. And 90+% were absolutely fine with the genocide.
So it's a radicalized society.
So you must note this name, Leibowitz. Okay, he was the Israeli philosopher, intellectual, who had predicted 40 years ago that Israel needs to get rid of the occupation as much more perhaps than the Palestinian, because like cancer, it's going to eat up the entire society. Right? It'll make into a police state. As they say, nations don't die, they commit suicide. And Israel, in my opinion, has committed suicide. The fact 90% of a country's population is okay with a genocide doesn't say much about its civil society. Economically, militarily, it can be very powerful, but the soft power is gone. And hence the diaspora, Jewish community diaspora, especially the young ones, are rebelling. What the hell? Not in our name, right? These are very, very... And remember, all the leading opposition to Israel are invariably from the Jewish community, be it Jeffrey Sachs, Chomsky, Mate, you name it, Jill Stein. These are heavyweight intellectuals, Holocaust scholars, right? They are completely, in my opinion, our Muslim people do not have the intellectual depth like these guys have, and they are on the forefront, right, fighting the battle for the Palestinians, because they're saying that this is becoming a genocidal society. So again, I'm saying it is an absolute disservice for us to ever call this a Jewish conspiracy, okay? This is a Zionist project of occupation, colonial, whatever you might want to say it, but please do not call this. Number two, I want to say is the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a European concept. The Arabs, the Muslims have nothing to do with it. So please, I mean, we should not say any comment that is anti-Semitic. If anything, the Jewish community's golden age happened under the Islamic civilization. And it wasn't coincident when in Spain, the Muslims, the Moors were excommunicated, the Jews went with them, all right? So Jews and Muslims have coexisted for 1,000+ years. So this anti-Semitism is a thing. And remember Holocaust, when it happened, the Nazis were initially expelling the Jews. It was the Europeans who refused to take in the Jewish population. The famous case of Jewish refugees going to Boston Harbor, going to New York, and were not able to allow. They weren't given permission and they had to go back to Europe, right? So anti-Semitism is hardcore European narrative. It is not. So please, I mean, we should not fall, stupidly into these traps, and we need to be very, very smart about it. The other thing, the river to the sea, Palestinian will be free. And I speak to Israelis, right? They see this as a genocide, ethnic cleansing of themselves. They're saying this slogan means that Israel, you people are saying that Israel will get wiped out. No. It is the Jordan River, the West Bank, and Gaza on the sea. And so this means that it's Gaza, the West Bank, and a divided Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. So we need to explain ourselves. River to the sea does not mean the wiping out of Israel. Israel is a reality. Whether we like it or not, it's there. And we need to, as I say, keep friends close, enemies closer. We need to engage. And remember, there were 2 occasions where the Israeli public actually had voted for the 2-state solution. The details, of course, I don't want to get into it. Also, last I want to say is that it is absolutely important for us to condemn all innocent people that are killed, okay? Including the victims of October 7th. Very, very important. If you guys are if we are going to condemn the IDF genocide of Gaza, we also need to acknowledge that किसी के बहन थे, किसी के mother थे, किसी के भाई थे, who got killed, the civilians who got killed on October 7th. So we keep our moral compass consistent, and it is important for us to proactively say that. Otherwise, there is no difference between us and those Zionist genociders who say, when our people get killed, oh my God, sky falls. When others get killed, we are fine with it. No, we are not fine with that. We cannot equate ourselves with these Zionist genocide supporters. Last but not least, I just want to say, you did mention in the thing, we need to again have moral and ethical consistency. When we are going to talk about against occupation, illegal displacement of people, we need to see close home. Beria town How many protested against Behria town when they grabbed government lands and displaced the villagers? I saw that line lagi हुई थी लोग file के. They were absolutely fine buying occupied land, displaced poor people, right? So I think Gaza needs to start from the boundaries of Karachi, right? So we need that. Again, Yemen में जब हो रहा है, Sudan में हो रहा है, we need to be morally, ethically consistent for us to be taken seriously by anyone, globally or at individual level. Thank you.
First class. Actually, the mic is finally working. I'd like to bring you back to the issue of activism, because that's something that I think, that's something that stumps a lot of people. As you said, what to do, how to do it. There are also counter pressures. When we talk about young people who are our core sort of audience and our key audience today as well, it's things like, if they kind of like a post on Instagram, will that cause a reaction to their college admission? So how can people become activists, and what exactly does it mean to be an activist when it comes to this issue?
Okay, so excellent question. Look, I think it is an individual choice, and let me explain you, right? I speak a lot against Zionism, etc., etc. The reality is because I can afford to at this stage in my life. If I was a college student going to America, I need to be smart about it. I can't, I'll get deported. This is the reality. And ek do slogan agar main maar dunga, Palestine will not get free, Zionism will not end, right? So I need to be smart about it. And it's not that I'm not courageous, I'm just being smart about it, right? So at different stages, different circumstances, whatever, wherever you feel you can do a smart contribution, do that. Do not be stupid. Do not be stupid. There is this billionaire club, and there are a lot of sinister people out there destroying people's careers. So please be smart about it. Wherever you can make a difference, absolutely do that. And also, in my, these movements, civil society movement, are not, Twitter or, social media, this thing. Serious, you look at Martin Luther's civil rights movement, it took decades and decades for it to really build up, right? You look at Nelson Mandela, he spent over 2 decades in prison for it to build up. Arab Spring was spontaneous, and guess what happened, right? So there is a difference between art and fashion, as they say. Fashion is spontaneous, you like it, you react to it at once, but it has a shelf life. Within 3 months, 6 months, gone. Art is something that grows on you. You might not like it, it's difficult to appreciate it, but over a period of time, it has a sustained thing. So we need to go for art movements, not fashion. It's trendy, social media, putting selfies. That does not. And last but not least is, a lot of time I find people actually do disservice to the cause that they are advocating. And let me explain you. There are norms, there are boundaries within laws, there are norms how to engage. Ab gali galoch dekar, you vilify the entire Jewish conspiracy is actually doing a disservice to the Palestinians. So like I said, do your hard work, research, understand and engage. Not be spontaneous, emotionally, humne dil khush kar liya, naare lagakar. That's absolute nonsense, okay? You need to, if you want to get involved, there are no free lunches in life. Trust me, okay? I'd rather people don't get involved than do a disservice to the cause by saying nonsensical things, and which is used by the opposition people. Look, this is what they're Hamas supporters, they want to wipe out Israel. That is the narrative on that side. Remember, they always say the settlers, they're not settlers. In occupied lands, you can't have settlers, they're occupiers. So change the narrative. You see, the reason why they use settlers is because it has a very soft image in the US. The US themselves they themselves committed a genocide, right? And they were settlers. It has a very nice tinge to it, right? So they use the same words. No, in occupied territory, they're occupiers. So try and advocate in those terms. This thing again, engage with the Jewish communities who are out there, Jewish movement. So show them support, that we are with you. So show Jews and Muslims, Arabs, all of them together, right? That is a much more powerful. Ya to aap gali galoch dekar, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Please do not do that. I'd rather you guys keep quiet than do these kind of stuff, right? Be smart. You guys look very, very smart. I'm sure you guys would do a great job.
Thanks, Amin. Actually, I want to open it up to some of the younger people over here and get their views. But just before I do that, I want you to talk a little bit about coming back to BDS, in the sense that there has been over the last, especially in this period of time, this great debate over whom to boycott. Now, on the one hand, there are certain companies, let's say like Palantir, who is developing AI software to actively target Palestinians using drones and all that. But on the other hand, there are companies, global franchises like, let's say, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, who have come under a lot of fire from the BDS movement. How do you draw that balance? How do you make that balance? Especially as this, I think, and you'll agree with me and the audience will agree, is something that's a debate going on in many, many households across the world. What is the quantum of involvement required to become a target of the BDS movement?
So look, most of the companies in the US take a position that we don't want to get involved in politics on either side, including Coke, including McDonald's. Now, McDonald's, the Israeli franchisee, gave free burgers to the IDF soldiers, and then it became. So McDonald's is now trying to buy out the franchisee, take it over, so such things do not happen. So McDonald's stated policy is we want to remain neutral. So is the policy of Coca-Cola, all of them. And Ben & Jerry's, by the way, is a very active anti-settler movement. Again, it was co-founded by a Jew, right? So they've been against the thing. So I'm saying we need to be very careful that aap BDS mein kare, don't drink Coke, fine. It's just giving a statement, a message across, but it's not enough. It's 0.00001% of you being effective. Far more you can be effective is reaching across the aisle if you really want to do it. If you just want to spend 10 seconds and feel good about it, go ahead, do it. But if you want to do something meaningful, roll up your sleeves, study this subject, engage on social media with Jewish communities in America, in Europe, who join those movements, show support as Muslims to Jewish groups that are supporting the Palestinians, right? So that it shows that it is not, because if you see the words, it is always, the Palestinians die and the Jews are also killed. It should be Israelis are being killed. Okay, it's a conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. But if you notice the word in the media, it's always Jews being killed and Palestinians being killed. Because Golda Meir, she said, remember this quote, it said, we can forgive the Arabs for killing our children, but we cannot forgive them for making us kill their children. All right? So they always claim this moral high ground.
Thanks, Amin. And we've got Fatima. Hi, Fatima. How are you? Welcome from everyone here in Karachi. I hope all went well in the doctor's appointment.
We woke up with my son, my little one, unwell and had to rush to the emergency room, and it's fine. Thank God it's just a virus. But I'm really sorry for making everyone wait. Apologies.
Not at all. We had an opportunity to hear from Amin Hashwani, who I believe you know, and who is a true authority on Palestine and issues there. But I'd like to welcome you in. And, Tanya had given an introduction for you. The thing that I'll add is that Fatma's latest work is this book. She's edited it, Gaza, The Story of a Genocide. And it's, if I'm correct, Fatima, it's stories taken from survivors who've come out of Gaza, right? They've contributed to it?
Well, I'll start by saying thank you to all of you. For some reason, I can only see myself, which is... But I can't see the audience, or maybe here now I can. Thank you, everyone, for being there. Gaza, the story of a genocide, is a collection of testimonies on the genocide, on exactly how a genocide is carried out, and in particular, how Israel has carried out this genocide. So we have contributors who are in Gaza. So Noor al-Yaqoubi she was in North Gaza when we contacted her to write for us about famine, about starvation, because she was being starved along with her family and her young child. And Noor is now in a tent. She remains in Gaza. But we have other contributors who are Gazans who have left, Gazans who live abroad, and allies as well. And just to point out that Amin was speaking about BDS, and Omar Barghouti, the co-founder of BDS, is included in the collection as well.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So I just want to get into a few things with you, Fatima. You know, the last 2 years, we've seen several conflicts. We've seen, obviously, the horrors in Gaza, where we have, I believe, 72,000 people killed so far, reported, and there's estimated to be maybe between 100,000 and 200,000 bodies lying under the rubble, and something close to 175,000 people wounded in Gaza. But at the same time, we've had a conflict in Ukraine, which has something like 350,000 people killed on both sides, over 1 million wounded, a civil war in Sudan. But for some reason, Palestine and the issue of Palestine and Gaza seems to tug at our heartstrings more. We all, I think I speak for the audience, have been affected by this a lot more than the other conflicts. So why Palestine? Why does this matter more? Why should it matter more?
I want to begin by saying that the number of 68,000, 65,000 that is often reported in the media is only the number of people who were brought into hospitals.
Right.
And in fact, the number dead that academics, scholars, scientists now believe is a truer reflection is 680,000 people killed by Israel. And of that number, which is extraordinary, it is believed that 380,000, so half of that number, were children under the age of 5. That is something unbearable to imagine. 380,000 children under the age of 5. If you add the children over the age of 5, then that becomes 409. It's almost 500,000 people. So the scale of what Israel has done to Gaza is unprecedented. It's unprecedented in many ways. War, obviously a hideous business, has certain rules of engagement that were put in place after World War II, after the Holocaust, to ensure that such horror never happened again, such as the illegality of bombing hospitals. Israel has absolutely flouted that international convention from day one. They have not only bombed hospitals, they have bombed schools, they have bombed residential buildings. Something like 92% of agricultural land in Gaza is either destroyed by Israel or it's rendered unreachable. What is unreachable is also decimated. So they have ensured that not only have they killed life, but they have ensured that no further life can be born. I'm talking to you from a hospital. I'm talking to you from a hospital where I've spent 4 hours waiting to see a doctor for my baby. And the reason it was very important for me to join you is not only because I promised my friend Tanya Zafar Khan that I would be here, but also because where I am right now, sitting in a hospital, is not possible for mothers in Gaza. If my child had a fever and a virus, and I lived in Gaza, and we came to a hospital, we would be risking our lives. We would be risking death. Not from disease, not from infection, but from airstrike, from drone strike. So, we have seen also what the Israelis do be called the fastest famine engineering in history. Alex Deval, who is a famine expert, has said, in modern history, we have not seen a starvation campaign enacted so swiftly and ruthlessly as what Israel has done to Gaza. Now, why is this unusual? It's unusual in a few respects. It's unusual because Israel has been essentially committing ethnic cleansing and extermination against the Palestinian people since 1948. They have been doing this year in and year out. They have created the largest cohort of child amputees in the world. Children in Ukraine, plus every other conflict in modern history, do not amount to the number of children wounded and murdered by Israel. They just do not add up. They have killed journalists. Again, a war crime. More journalists have been killed in Gaza by Israel than journalists killed in Vietnam, World War I, and World War II combined total. So in terms of horror, in terms of numbers, there is no comparison to Israel, none. It's unique because while Israel has been doing this, while they have been enacting a Holocaust, essentially, the meaning of the word Holocaust is a great burning. This is a great burning. This is a Holocaust. And I don't like to call it a genocide. And I think we will need new words. They have been taking photos, taking videos, and broadcasting to the entire world what they are doing. They are not keeping it secret. Now, obviously what's happening in Sudan is atrocious, and you can find Israel's footprint there too. You can find their fingerprint there too. You can find their weapons, you can find their training, you can find their surveillance present there as well. When it comes to Ukraine, I personally don't think there's a comparison. The Ukrainian people have the arms, the munition, billions and billions of dollars of aid from the most powerful countries in the world on their side. They have the world's media on their side, whereas Palestine and Sudan are dying in darkness. They're dying in darkness, but their killers are fighting in daylight. So I don't feel it's a parallel. The issue of Ukraine is essentially an issue for Western Europe, and this is a tussle between Russia and Europe. But the issue of Palestine is one of the world. The issue of Palestine is one of the world because everything centers in Palestine. The fight against colonialism, the fight against imperialism, racism, dehumanization, all of that centers there. And what I think is really important, I'm sorry for giving you such a long answer, but what Israel has allowed to happen and what the rest of the world has essentially covered for Israel to do, which is to break international law, to bomb hospitals, to kill children at this rate, is essentially a template that's going to be used from now on. So when people say to me, why do you always talk about Palestine? Why do you always care about Gaza? Why aren't you talking about other issues? The thing I feel I have to say to them is we are all Palestine. And our country, more than any, needs to know that what they are doing to Gaza, not they might do it to us, they will do it to us. It's a question of when. Because let's not forget that Pakistan is the only Muslim country with a nuclear asset, which is incredibly threatening to the likes of Israel. It's incredibly threatening to the likes of the West. And when they are bombing Gazan hospitals, and we are not screaming at the top of our lungs, we create an environment where tomorrow they will bomb Pakistani hospitals, and it will pass in silence. So I feel the world has a responsibility to take this really as a turning point. And what we allow to happen to Gaza will come for us. And it doesn't matter where we are. It'll come for England, it'll come for France, it'll come for Sweden, but it will not come for them as fast as it will come for Pakistan, as it will come for the global south.
Thanks, Fatma. I want to make this interactive because I know...
Oh, I can't hear you.
Is this better?
No.
Yes. Sound?
You can use this.
Can you hear me now?
Yikes, no.
Okay.
Do you want to have someone type it in the chat?
Yeah. Can we have someone type it in the chat?
If you can hear me, I'm happy to keep answering, but I just don't hear you.
Okay. What I'll do is I'm throwing it open. I want to ask some of the younger people over here, what do they think of what Fatma's just said? Any of you guys? Have a question? Sure. A young man presents himself.
We live in this very technological advance time, so you could always tell someone to email me the question, and I'll just carry on speaking.
Please.
मेरा नाम मुज़म्मिल हातमी है और मैं इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में एमफिल कर रहा हूँ और जो मेरा थीसिस का सब्जेक्ट है वो मिडल ईस्ट स्पेशली फ़लस्तीन इशू है। तो जहाँ तक मेरा सवाल है मैडम फातिमा भुट्टो से।
Yes, now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
कि आप क्या समझती हैं कि इसराइल को किस तरह रोका जा सकता है? जो गुज़िश्ता 2 साल हमने क़त्ल-ए-आम देखा फ़लस्तीन के अंदर, ऐसा ही एक सीन 1982 में बैरूत के अंदर हुआ जब इजरायली आर्मी 1 हफ़्ते के अंदर बैरूत पहुंच गई क्योंकि वहाँ पे मुज़ाहमत नहीं हुई थी। आज फ़लस्तीन बिलखुसूस गज़ा में जो कुछ हो रहा है, अगर हम हमास को वेपन दे के सपोर्ट करेंगे तो इसराइल को रोका जा सकता है। बाकी दुनिया में जो कुछ भी हो रहा है इसके बावजूद भी इसराइल अमरीकी सपोर्ट और आशीर्वाद से क़त्ल-ए-आम यानी कि शाम के अंदर कर रहा है, यमन के अंदर कर रहा है, ईरान के अंदर कर रहा है, इराक़ के अंदर कर रहा है। तो सिर्फ़ और सिर्फ जहाँ तक मेरी जो है सोच है,
इसमें एक सवाल दे दें ताकि बाकी
यही है कि आप लोग क्या समझते हैं, हथियार के अलावा, मुज़ाहमत के अलावा क्या इसराइल को किसी और तरीके से रोका जा सकता है?
Very good question, Fatima. It's about the issue of resistance. So,
yes.
Can you kind of expand upon that?
Yes, I think it's an important question to answer. There's a simple and a not simple answer. The simple answer is Israel can be stopped with a phone call from the President of the United States. The example of Beirut was given. Where, this is obviously mythologized, but when Israel was bombing Beirut in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan saw a photo of a child that had been maimed by the IDF, or the IOF, as we should call it, the Israeli occupation forces. And Ronald Reagan picked up the phone, called Begin, and said, "That's it. I'm cutting you off. Stop it." And they did stop it. And that was it. And we know very clearly that a phone call from the United States could end this right now in the time that we are spending together talking. We also know that if the West, whether we're talking about the European Union or the United Kingdom, simply cut them off from the arms, that would certainly slow it down. They don't have the money, they don't have anything, they don't have the ability to drop one bomb without weapons from the Western world. That said, Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia said, do you know what, we're going to raise oil prices and the whole world is going to suffer unless these people are stopped, it could be stopped. If Muslim countries banded together and said, we are putting together a force, we are coming with our navies, we are coming with our armies, we are coming with our air forces, they might not stop in an hour. And I say this because Gaza is under total blockade. So remember that Gaza, people in Gaza cannot leave by foot, they cannot leave by air, and they cannot leave by sea, okay? If the Muslim countries of the world got together and said that, I don't know that would stop them immediately because the Western world would probably help Israel against us. So the easy answer is that Israel can be stopped in a matter of hours if they are cut off by their benefactors. The larger issue to touch upon the issue of resistance is that if there was not resistance in Gaza, then Israel's Holocaust would be complete. Now, in international law, and you can look at any country you want in the world, it is unheard of that a resistance movement does not have the right to fight an occupying power. It is enshrined in international law that you have the right to resist of occupying power. And it is also enshrined in international law that an occupier bears a duty of care to the people it occupies. Of course, Israel is an exception to everything, so Israel need not follow any rule. But let's go a little further than that, and let's say that people under occupation do not get asked. It is not a condition of negotiation to disarm before occupation is ended. It's simply not. So, we're reading recently about Pakistan and Pakistan saying that Pakistan is going to ensure disarmament. This is absolutely, it flies in the face of international convention and legality, but it's also quite a sinister thing to promise. Because without resistance, there would be nothing left in Gaza. There would be absolutely nothing left. No one left, no people left. Let's also just take a step back and say that even Israel's flimsiest and most pathetic examples, for example, they claim to have bombed hospitals because they say the resistance was sheltering underneath. It doesn't matter. It is illegal to bomb hospitals. Even if, which there weren't, even if resistance were underneath the hospitals, you cannot bomb hospitals. Even if a journalist you are claiming is a member of a resistance, you cannot attack journalists. Now, this is, of course, in the face of the fact that every person, not man, every man and woman in Israel between the ages of 18 and 65 serves in their military. So they are not civilians, okay? That would then lend itself to the fact that journalists are actually not journalists. At the time that Israel makes these excuses, nobody turns around and says, well, okay, how about you then? We don't do that. How can Israel be stopped then? This is a really complicated question. And it's an important question because if Israel is not stopped, they will have another genocide, they will have another Holocaust, and they will not rest until they have erased Palestine. And when they're done with Palestine, they will keep going, as we have seen in Lebanon, as we have seen in Syria, as we have seen in plenty and plenty of places. So I think what we have to do is to go back to what Amin was saying earlier, that we have to be part of how Israel is stopped. And we have a lot of power. We have a lot of power because we have certainly, and I mean we, the collective we have slowed Israel down. Netanyahu himself said, if it were not for protests every single week around the world, they would have been done with their job much faster. If it were not for boycotting, they would be certainly much freer to do what they want. I just want to go back to what I heard Amin say just a second ago when I joined, was that the policy of Coca-Cola and McDonald's and all this to be neutral. That's what they claim their policy is. But McDonald's gives free food to the Israeli army. To me, that's not neutral. And I am very happy to go the rest of my life, and I hope you are too, because it's easy never to touch anything from McDonald's again, never to buy Coca-Cola again. The amount of things that I have boycotted in the last 2 years has cost me nothing. It's easy to boycott. It's easy, and I don't want to give my money to something that is quashing dissent, is quashing protest, and is funding genocide, is supporting genocide. So we have to do this at scale. We have to do this at scale, and we have to be a vanguard in a sense. So when our governments, when our MPs, when our politicians, whoever they are, when they start to talk about peace, I spell this P-I-E-C-E, not peace like as in peace, with Israel, we have to say no. Not on our watch, not on our time, and Israel has to be isolated. They have to be isolated every single place that they can be found. Academically, in arts, in culture, in business, in tourism, in everything. And they have to know it. That's simply how we can stop them, from our part at least.
Fatma, in fact, that leads me to, because it's another sort of question to you, because it's not just about what's happened in Gaza over the last 2 years and a bit. I want you to speak a little bit about actually what it means to be Palestinian in what is essentially an apartheid state, where the fact that you're a certain ethnicity means that you have less rights than someone from a slightly different ethnicity. And I just want to pull up some figures, especially for, as I said, the audience and the younger people. So under Israeli military law, throwing stones and objects is a specific offense, and the military law empowers Israeli authorities to detain and prosecute anyone over the age of 12, right? And over the last, I think these figures are from Save the Children, over the last 20 years, so we're talking about well before the current conflict in Gaza, something like 10,000 children have been detained by Israeli authorities, right? So this is, we're talking about between the ages of 12 and 18, and I think for those of us who have children in that age group, this is a very, very telling and sobering figure. On the other hand, if an Israeli kid gets into trouble, especially in the West Bank and the territories over there, their parents are called in. They're called into the local police station, not without a guardian. They have to go with a guardian. They're called in daylight, so they're not kept overnight. And if you look at the record of Israeli courts, the likelihood that the courts will give bail to an Israeli minor is something like 70%, and then the likelihood that a Palestinian minor will get bail is something like 15%. So, can you sort of speak to this, to the rise of the apartheid state?
Absolutely. Israel was founded as an apartheid state. Israel is an ethno-nationalist state. And what that means is something, again, very chilling. So just as you've said, yesterday I moderated an event with two of the contributors in our book, with Ahmed Al-Naouk, who has an essay in the book on mental health, and Ahmed Massoud, who is a poet and has a poem that was written to his brother who was killed in Gaza. And both Ahmed Al-Naouk and Ahmed Massoud told me something really chilling, which I want to share with you. Ahmed Massoud's niece, who was 3 years old, was born with a form of cancer that was very fast spreading. And again, anyone who has a child in their life, and you don't need to be a parent, you could be a sibling, you could be an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, knows that there's nothing worse than to see a child suffer. Now, Ahmed Al-Naouk's niece, who was born with this cancer, required a treatment that was not available in Gaza. Why was it not available? Not because there are not hospitals, not because there were not doctors, but because Israel does not allow certain equipment into Gaza. It doesn't allow Palestinians to have education. It doesn't allow them to travel to learn, and so on. So what that means is that a Palestinian who needs medical attention needs to go to Israel. Israel, not Gaza, not the West Bank, but 48, what is called Israel 48. And what that means is they need permission. So they have to apply for permits from Israel to go to a hospital that can treat their cancer. Now, Israel will take years to give this permission, which they did to this 3-year-old child, who was, of course, 1-year-old, and then 1.5, and then 2. And then finally, when she was 3 years old, the Israeli permission came through. But they gave permission to the child, but not to her mother and not to her father. So what that meant is that this 3-year-old baby can go to Israel for treatment, but she has to go alone. Now, who among you would send your child alone into the belly of the beast, a cancer patient, as a child? You wouldn't. And that's exactly what happened. Her parents could not send her alone, and she died. Now, Ahmed Al-Naouk had the same case of his mother. His mother, who was not a child, but an elderly woman, had breast cancer. The survival rate of breast cancer patients in the United Kingdom is above 80%. So it's something like 86, 87%, okay? Breast cancer survival rates in Gaza is around 20%, 22 or 23% if I'm not mistaken. And again, it falls to the same thing. They refused to give the permission. When they did, they practiced a bureaucracy of humiliation, okay, only towards Palestinians. So we'll give you the permit, but you have to come alone. And in the case of Ahmed Al-Naouk's mother, they said, okay, you have to pass a checkpoint. Now, this checkpoint is another bureaucracy of humiliation. If a Palestinian has to go to work and they have to cross, Palestinians have permits, just like blacks in South Africa did during apartheid. So it would be akin to saying, you live in Nazmabad, you have permit A, you live in Shari Faisal around Sadr, whatever, you have permit B, you live in Defense, phase 4, you have permit C. You cannot go to each other's area. You can only stay in your area. You are in a literal concentration camp. You're in a cage. This is how apartheid is practiced. And in the case of Ahmed Al-Naouk's mother, when she was finally given the permission and she had to pass the checkpoint, they told her she had to go by foot. And she had to walk a kilometer. And this is an elderly cancer patient. She died soon after. So what it means to live in an apartheid state means to be landlocked. When we say Gaza is an open-air prison, I think that's incorrect. It is a concentration camp. So people in Gaza cannot leave. Karachi is a massive, massive city. Just imagine if you were not allowed to leave Karachi, how suffocated you would feel. if you were not allowed to go to Badin or Hala or Islamabad, you would be essentially a prisoner. You would be a hostage, perhaps more correctly. The other thing that happens is that when you do have to pass this checkpoint, and I'm sorry for the young people in the room, but Israel practices systematic sexual abuse and harassment of Palestinians. And in this case, women. So women who had university places or jobs or who had to work for their family to survive and had to pass through a checkpoint were routinely sexually abused. And of course, in our cultures, in any culture, but especially in ours, that's a source of great shame for a family and for the women themselves. Now, we also know, and again, I apologize, but Palestinians you mentioned are kept in Israeli prisons as young as the age of 12. They can be kept without charge for years. We've seen some of those hostages. Again, we mustn't call them prisoners, because a prisoner is someone who has been convicted, has faced the law, has had the right to a defense, and then has to serve time. These are hostages because they have never even been accused. Often they do not even know what they are put into these Israeli torture centers for. We know, thanks to Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem, but also because of the UN, and we know from Palestinian organizations like Al-Haq, and from the hostages themselves, that they are systematically abused, they are raped, and they are tortured in these Israeli centers. What apartheid means, essentially, is you have a right, but the person sitting next to you does not have that same right. So that goes to medical care, to rights before the law, to the right to marry, to the right to travel, to the right to move freely. And there is no question that Israel is an absolutely criminal state on all of these fronts. And I'll just give you another example. And if I'm talking too much, Omar, please tell me, and I can try and make my answers shorter.
Please, continue.
But we watched famine. Now, I said earlier that it's the fastest engineered famine in modern history. Supposedly, we are in a ceasefire. Now, a ceasefire means that the fire has ceased. But yet, when you watch BBC, you will hear that yesterday, Israel killed 65 Palestinians. If one Palestinian is killed, that no longer is a ceasefire. Ceasefire is ended. Rifat al-Arir, the Palestinian poet who was murdered by Israel along with his family, said, what happens is we cease and they fire. And that seems to be the case. Now, in this ceasefire, Israel was supposed to allow aid back in, and it was supposed to allow food back in. Let's just unpack that for a second. Israel, because they keep Gaza under total blockade for 20 years, has counted the exact amount of calories that Gaza needs to live, but not well, just above dying, okay? And you can, if you just Google this, you can find articles in The Guardian. This is not a conspiracy theory. So Israelis is particularly noted exactly how many calories, I believe it's 1,300 calories for adults, that are needed to keep the body living, but nothing more than living. And so the moment that they wanted to starve Gaza, it was very easy to switch that spigot off because they know exactly how to do it. Besides which, they cannot get anything in any other way. They cannot have ships bring in things. They cannot have cargo come in any other way. So they're supposed to lift that and bring in food. But what Israel is doing right now is something incredibly sinister called, it's a scientific term, famine engineering. So they're supposed to let food come in right now. They are bringing in things like Nutella. They are bringing in things like junk food, like Pepsi. But they're not bringing in anything that would give nutrition. Again, scientists have said that the rate of starvation practiced by Israel in Gaza is equal to Stalingrad. And Stalingrad, for those who don't know, in World War II was starved to the extent that even when the people had food, their bodies continued to eat themselves. Their bodies continued to eat away at their stores of flesh and fat because the bodies had broken down. So this is not just a system of apartheid, it's also a system of abuse, it's a system of control, and it's also a system of humiliation. And I'll share again what Ahmed Massoud shared with the audience last night, is that he said, even not during the Holocaust, what Israel would do would be to remove items from the market, just to show, I control you. So one day you would go to the market and there would be no potatoes. No reason, there's no shortage of potatoes, you can't have them. Then you would get potatoes back and they would stop flour. Why flour? People need flour, but when will it stop? When will it end? No saying. And so this is a pathologically sadistic system of control over an occupied people. And you know, this is just a small sample. We cannot even imagine really what apartheid means on a daily basis.
Grim. I want to bring some of the audience in, and again, I'd really like to listen from some of the younger audience members. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and one of the ushers will come to you. Please.
So there
say your name as well. Just
Iman, there are so many countries like the US that are funding Israel and the genocide, and they have the power to end it. So why don't they? And are they benefiting from it in any way?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really, really important question. Yeah, of course they're benefiting from it. They're absolutely benefiting from it. Let's just look at the US for a second. The US, when Condoleezza Rice once promised to reshape the Middle East, to give birth to the new Middle East, okay? That was in 2006, 5, something like that. And it may have taken this long, but they've effectively done that. So Syria, the country that I grew up in, which was a country that was independent. Effectively, Syria had no debt. They owed no money to the IMF. Yeah, that meant you couldn't buy Starbucks, and it meant you couldn't buy Burger King, but it meant you were not indebted in this vice grip to international institutions. Syria now has the former head of al-Nusra, the Al-Qaeda branch of the Middle East, as their president. Okay. Syria was a secular country. It was not democratic by any means, but it was secular. When the Americans invaded Iraq, 1 million Christians were welcomed into Syria. That's gone now. Syria used to aid the resistance. They used to aid Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they used to aid Hamas in Palestine. That's finished now. Lebanon, let's look at Lebanon. Hezbollah really is the only organization that has actually defeated Israel, and not just once, but it's really pushed Israel back more than states have done. Hezbollah has effectively been, I wouldn't say destroyed. It's not been destroyed, but it's certainly been very damaged. Okay, America is now building the largest embassy in the region in Lebanon. It's a fortress. So you look at Iraq. You look at all these countries. These used to be countries that had their own foreign policy, that may not have had the sweetest politicians in charge, but they were independent. They stood against Israel. That no longer remains. So from a combative region, the US now has a pliant region. What does the Middle East have? Well, it has oil. That's one. It's to put Israel in the middle of the Middle East is essentially to control the Middle East, to control oil and gas. The question you ask about why do they fund Israel, why do they do this, is such an important question. And I'm going to share with you what I've learned and also what I think. I think you have to go back, and I believe Amin alluded to this from what I could hear when I joined, but Muslim countries have never had any problem with the Jewish people, never. Jews did not face pogroms in Muslim countries. Jews were very integrated, even in Pakistan, in India, and wherever. Jews, however, were persecuted for centuries in Western countries, not just in the Western countries, but also in the United States. I think there's a fundamental racism in the West, and this is why they support Israel so much. The West is not only racist against Muslims, it's not only racist against brown and black people, but it's also incredibly racist against Jews, and that's why they were very happy to ship out their populations that survived the Holocaust, to put them somewhere else. I think as well, what's very important to think is that when you start to look at Israel, not as an ally of the United States, but as an outpost of the United States, when you start to look at them as a 51st state, essentially, as an arm of America and its imperial and foreign policies, then Israel makes a lot more sense. And again, when we talk about democracies, when we talk about democracy, the basic principle of a democracy, which is obviously unfamiliar to us as Pakistanis, but the basic principle of a democracy is that you elect someone and then you tell them what you as a population want, and they are obliged to carry out the wishes. They are servants of the people. So it bears asking why in England, in the United Kingdom, where 1 million people gather some Saturdays to protest for Palestine and against Israel and against their genocide, and the British government doesn't listen to them? Are these effectively democracies anymore? And I don't think they are. I don't think they are. We are now in a situation that is unprecedented, as I said. And what it means is that we have to question everything we thought we knew. You know, a lot of us were raised with this idea that, okay, we don't have democracy, but those guys do. Well, guess what? They don't have it either. They just have a more sophisticated system that covers it up better.
Very valid point. Questions? Yes, the lady in the pink. And if you can raise your hand so that, okay, we'll get.
Hi.
And Alina, I think there are a couple over there after her. Please, just.
Hi, my name's Shazia Shah. I just wanted to ask something following on from what you were talking about, saying about democracy, etc. Israel has waged a war on, 7 fronts with complete and utter impunity. It's really, flagrantly flouted international laws, international norms, the international rules-based order that we grew up with. What hope is there for the UN now? Should it just pack up, close up shop? What do we do? Netanyahu and Trump together have basically made a mockery of it.
Yes. Yeah, to answer your question, it's a very important question. Yes, it should pack up. Because as far as I can tell, the United Nations has the power to launch a war, as in the war against Iraq, but it does not have the power to stop a genocide. Now let's also just look at the fact that the more United Nations workers have been killed by Israel than by any other country in the entire history of the United Nations, number one. Let us also look at the fact that the United Nations has suspended South Africa from its General Assembly during apartheid. Why has it not suspended Israel? Not just for apartheid, but for mass murder. Why is it that countries, including Pakistan, pay dues to the United Nations? Or, why are we paying dues to an organization that cannot do anything except protect the bloodthirsty and protect the perpetrators of war? What is the United Nations as a body there for? Supposedly, it was there to stop a Holocaust. It was there to stop something like World War II from happening. And it has failed at that. It should absolutely be broken down. Now, UNICEF, I think, still does good work. UNRWA still does good work. Both Sonia Falero and I, as the editors of the book that you have before you, we're giving our editor royalties to UNRWA. So the UN certainly has bodies and wings that do good work, but the General Assembly, the thing that sits in the middle of New York, pack it up and send it home. It's ineffectual and it's a waste of time. It's also, I should say, sorry, just to add, it's a requirement, it's a legal obligation of states to intervene to stop genocide. So if, let's say, this won't happen, but we can dream, right? If Pakistan was to say, we are sending our Air Force now to protect the Palestinian people, we would be legally obliged to do that, and we would be legally protected to do that. No one has done it.
Gentleman at the back, and then there's a young lady over there. Sir.
Yeah, hi, my name is Suleiman. I was wondering, aside from October 7th, what other reasons do you think that there's more coverage of Gaza in the past 2 years than there have been pre-October 7th?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I want to begin by telling you that Israel has effectively done an October 7th every week since October 7th to the Palestinian people. And Israel has done October 7th to the Palestinian people since 1948, since even before 1948, okay? So let's also keep in mind, I think this is very important to know, that the men who carried out October 7th In most of their cases, that was the first time they'd ever set foot outside of the concentration camp they lived in. That was the first time that any of them had ever put a hand or a head outside of Gaza, because they were effectively born and raised as prisoners, as hostages. Why is there more coverage, Suleiman? I was a university student during the second Intifada. I used to wear a keffiyeh in New York in 2000. I went to every protest, and if you had told me that this would be happening 20 years later, I would not have believed you. But I think a turning point has been reached finally, and I think one, Israel carried out this atrocity, not just in daylight, but very proudly. You have government ministers calling Palestinians human animals, wipe them all out, going on television and promising that fuel and water would be cut, electricity would be cut. And not only that, we have seen them document their crimes. And thanks to social media, which I used to be a bit of a critic of, and I'm certainly not a critic of anymore, we've seen it. So maybe before October 7th, we had to read the press. We had to read Dawn, we had to read the New York Times, we had to read whatever else, we had to watch CNN and BBC. We were not able to comprehend the scale of their criminality. Whereas now it's clear as day. Even with all the censorship online, we can see very well what they're doing. And I think that none of us will ever recover, Suleiman. I will never recover from what I've seen in these past 2 years. And I believe that I have been fundamentally damaged and destroyed by what I've seen Israel do. And I will never forget it. I will never forget it. And my life has been changed by it. That's me. I'm sure many of you here today feel exactly the same. And multiply you by thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions. And we are not going to let it go back to October 6th. This is what we have to remember, is that even before October 7th, 2023 was the most dangerous month for Palestinian children. More Palestinian children had been murdered by Israel in the months preceding October 7th than in the past decade, I believe it is, but correct me if I'm wrong. So what is very essential for us all to do from now on is to never, ever let Israel go back to October 6th. Never. They cannot reset this narrative. They cannot be reintroduced into society. Whatever fear or delicacy or politeness we had or worry we had about talking about Israel before on October 6th, we must vow never to return to.
The young lady, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I had it like a two-parter in a sense. I wanted to know why you think the propaganda is so successful, even with all the media coverage we've been seeing. Why is this specific propaganda working so well? And also, even with all the videos we've seen recently, even in the past like couple days, we know that they've been living out of tents, and now with the rain coming in, even though this has been going on for 2 years, what essentially does climate as well have in part of this?
Natasha, those are two brilliant questions. And I think that to answer your first question, there's two sides to it. The first is that Israel's propaganda and its reputation succeed, I think, on the back of one fundamental point, which is Western racism. That's it. It's that they have so thoroughly demonized and dehumanized, not just Palestinians, but Asians, not just Asians, but Muslims, and again, not just Muslims, but black and brown people. And I think that's a massive, massive, massive reason for it. I've spent a lot of time in the West, I've studied in the West, I've worked in the West, and I have seen people post about Iranian women and go to protests for Iranian women and, really activate for them. And you know what? They don't say a word about Palestinian women. And why is that? Why can you talk about Iranian women and not about Palestinian women who are being put through cesareans without anesthesia. And it can only be because you fundamentally are a racist. You think that the most important thing about a woman is what she wears. That's it. And if it's a Muslim person putting that woman in a hijab, then you're all for that woman, you know. But if that woman doesn't happen to wear a hijab or, you know, wants to wear a hijab, I'm really sorry, but white people don't know what to do with that. And I think there's a fundamental racism there. And it, you know, I don't want to excuse anyone here. Friends of mine have said to me things like, it's unconscious bias or whatever. I don't really care. They may know they're racist, they may not know they're racist, but they are racist. That's why it works. Your second, just a slight tweak to that is that Israeli Hasbara doesn't work anymore. It used to work, and it is failing. And we have to keep ensuring it fails, okay? You know, every accusation is a confession. I'm sure you've heard that expression, Natasha, and it happens to be true. And part of the reason it's now seen as true is because people are insisting. People are not stopping, you know? I would love to go back to my old life of just, you know, being sort of a quiet kind of person who does whatever they have to do and, you know, talk us about books once and then, and that's it. But I just won't do it until Palestine is free. I don't care. I will post from now till forever. You know, I'll go to every protest and I will have every argument. And, you know, I'm not alone. I know so many people feel the same. And so we have to ensure, you know, the one thing that Israelis are very good at is insisting on their propaganda. And it's time now that we insist on truth, because truth will always defeat propaganda. And your second question about climate, it's not just what's happening in Gaza. Forgive me, I don't remember the numbers, so I'll need to be corrected, but if we're looking at 2024, so if we're looking at last year, I believe in just that first 9 months of the Holocaust, Israel released more carbon into the atmosphere than 20 of the world's most climate vulnerable nations. The effect of 6 Hiroshimas, like the waste, the damage into the atmosphere of an equivalent of 6 Hiroshima, I think cannot be understood. We don't know what effect that will have because we've never lived through anything like that. You may remember that last year there were floods across Western Europe. You know, in Spain, in Valencia, there was that torrential rain. In Caribbean islands, there was really horrible flooding. To me, and again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a climate specialist, but to me, these are effects of that carbon being released every single day into the atmosphere. Nina Lakhani, who's also in our book, Nina is the climate justice editor for The Guardian, and Nina, we commissioned her a piece on specifically your question, that what is the environmental impact? And it remains to be seen, but it's going to be horrific. And the thing we know about climate damage is that it doesn't just stay in one place, it travels. So when you're seeing freak weather, that's not just global heating, I think that's also the Israeli military and what they've brought in Gaza.
Fatma, I'm conscious that I want you to get back to your child. We have perhaps one final question.
Sure.
The distinguished gentleman on the second row, sir.
My name is Azhar Jamil, and it's nice to see
You
you.
hold the mic closer.
Nice to see you too.
Nice to see you too. And
Nice to see you.
yeah, I mean, this has been a very interesting discussion and your perspectives on it. I think Israel is very isolated, and it has got support worldwide from the people, even in the West. The Western governments, be it Israel, be it Germany or France or England, they have the support of about 20% of their electorate. So much for democracy over there. But there's also the support that the Palestinians have from the Houthis of Yemen, and the support that Iran has very well in the 12th day.
I'd ask that you do a question rather than a comment.
No, what I'm saying is, in this scenario, and then we take the other thing of Mamdani winning in the citadel of capitalism, all these things are not isolated, they're interconnected. So with this kind of international support, I think the MAGA movement is now saying, questioning, is it Israel first or is it America first? So all these cracks are appearing. So which gives us a lot of hope, because what Israel has done is on a suicidal path. And I don't think Netanyahu's strategy can be somehow, if he's losing, is to drag America into a war against Iran. And so these things will be attempted, but overall, people are far more alert. The countries in the region are alert, and in the heart of America, people are supporting, are against what Netanyahu is doing. So doesn't this augur well for what is happening for the Palestinians?
I wish that I could be optimistic about it. And I'll tell you my reservations just briefly. I think Mamdani winning is wonderful. And just to go back to what Amin said, it's Jewish New Yorkers who really voted for Mamdani, who did not vote for Andrew Cuomo, who was, by the way, Andrew Cuomo, who was Mamdani's opponent, volunteered to be on the legal team of Netanyahu at the ICJ. So people who are Jewish in New York chose not to back that man. They backed Mamdani. I think that's wonderful. And I think, we have to celebrate this and we have to congratulate it. However, as with Obama before, as with AOC, as with Bernie Sanders, who have all served happily and faithfully the interests of AIPAC, we have to be cautious in that hope. I hope that Zoran will be the exception and will break this pattern. But I don't know that he will be able to, because he is facing a lot of hostility within his own party. I don't know that he'll be able to. Obama did nothing for Palestine, actively nothing. So, Bernie refused to call for a ceasefire. Bernie basically was thanked by AIPAC just a few months ago on Twitter. So I'm not sure that that's going to change anything. In terms of what you said about Iran and Yemen, Yemen is being bombarded, nonstop by Western countries. Yemen has been absolutely brutalized by Saudi Arabia. When you talk about Iran, I think I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you with something that's not hopeful, but I think important. What they are planning for now is a new phase, okay? And that new phase is going to be the carving up of Gaza, okay? They're going to do it like they did, in this very, technical, bureaucratic way. Why is Jared Kushner, who is not a member of government, he's not a member of Congress, he's not in the president's administration in any form, why is Jared Kushner in Israel making speeches? Because they want to sell Jared Kushner Gaza, I'm very worried about that, okay? Maybe you saw a piece in the news about how wealthy Westerners, including Israelis, paid money during the Bosnian War. They paid over 90,000 pounds, I believe it was, to go and be snipers. They played snipers. If they wanted to shoot children, they paid more. Now, this is a horrible news story, and it's just come out a few days ago, and I suspect that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that was set up to give aid was the same thing. And maybe we won't find out, and my theory won't be confirmed, but I would put my hand on the fire and say in 20 years we'll find out it was the same thing. It's mercenary, it was death for fun. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is that in this new phase, they're going to keep going with the Abraham Accords, okay? The Abraham Accords, one of the stated objectives of October 7th was to stop Saudi Arabia from recognizing Israel, which Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is very keen to do, okay? He will not do it without making other Muslims go first. So you may have seen in the press, there are stories about Indonesia recognizing Israel. There's also stories about Pakistan recognizing Israel. And when they want to destroy Iran and Iranian support for Palestine, guess where they will seek to do that from? From Pakistan. Okay, and so we have to be very alert. We have to be very, very conscious right now of what is happening. When your government starts to talk about a two-state solution, I ask you please to remember that Pakistan's position, the reason your passport says you are not allowed to enter Israel, is because Pakistan has never believed in a two-state solution. It has always believed in a one-state solution, okay, and that state is called Palestine. So you have a very important role. You have to be on the alert, and you have to say no, not in your name, when people start to talk about this as though it's inevitable or as though it's unstoppable. It is not inevitable, and it is absolutely stoppable. So I don't have a lot of hope for the future, but I have a lot of hope in people. I have a lot of hope in the people's movement of BDS. I have a lot of hope in our protests, and I have a lot of hope in our solidarity and our love for Palestinians that I know we feel, because if our country was being ravaged in this way, I would want to know that people around the world were thinking of us and talking for us. And if we want this global community to exist, then we have to be part of building it.
Fatma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to come to the end of this session. And thank you for joining us despite having a very, very trying day. Thank you, Amin, for sort of, helping us out in... Amin would like to ask... Amin is a young man who's very keen to ask you a question, so...
Please.
Look, I totally agree that racism is in the DNA of the Western society, and it's not at the political level only, and not only at the societal, but also at the institutional level. I mean, I always say that, if Malala was shot by an IDF soldier in Gaza advocating for education, I wonder would she have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And the Nobel Peace Prize was given to the person who's a Zionist, Bibi Netanyahu, Trumpian supporter, right? So and it was quite glaring what she did after after receiving the prize. My question to you is, we are where we are. Okay, this is the reality. We cannot wish the Israelis away. Zionism will continue. What would be your advice to the young generation, or even the elders for that matter? What is it, apart from boycotting and not drinking Cokes and burgers, which is good for your health? How do you do more, right? And my earlier point was, look, there is a fissure within a generational thing between the Jewish community. The elder Jews saw this, the Holocaust and the '67 war, while the young generation now is seeing the Gaza, and therefore not in my name movement. So wouldn't it be a good idea for Muslim youth all over the world start engaging with the young Jewish populations, so that it shows this is a resistance, it's not a, it is a secular issue, it's against occupation, this is not a religious clash of civilization. And any specific concrete steps that you can suggest to the youngsters especially, that they can do 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah. I think this is probably a better note for us to end on. And I would say this. I would say that we have to reimagine, I mentioned this when we began, we have to reimagine everything that we thought we knew. So the Nobel Peace Prize is actually not a respectable prize. It's not a respectable institution. Please think of who won it. Henry Kissinger, Barack Obama, Shimon Peres, what are we looking at? We are looking at a prize that effectively is a soft power movement for empire, ultimately, right? Because as you said, 2 years into a genocide, they should have nominated Palestinian doctors, or they should have nominated Palestinian journalists for the Peace Prize, not a Venezuelan neoliberal who wants to bomb her own country. I've never heard of somebody who wins a Peace Prize and then asks for the United States to bomb her own country. Okay, we have to reimagine it, and it's a very, if I might say, it's a very exciting time for the youth, because you inherited a damaged world. You inherited a broken, corrupt world where nothing was as it seemed, and your illusions have been shattered. You cannot glue back the UN. You cannot glue back the Nobel Peace Prize. You cannot glue back Hollywood. You cannot glue back your favorite singer who has stayed quiet about genocide. You cannot glue back Shah Rukh Khan, who is the world's most famous Muslim and has said not one word about Gaza. You cannot glue that back together. And so it's a fantastic moment for you to take action and build what we need. Now we are at the service of Western institutions. They don't serve us. So let's start building our own. So what I would say to young people is, you're being censored on Twitter. You're all so smart. You have coding knowledge. You have technical knowledge. The rest of us can barely do. You know, if I have to, my friends who are older than me think I'm a genius because I know how to restart my phone. You know, but that's basically all I know. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do anything. But you guys do. So make the next Twitter. Make it. You know, are you telling me there are no billionaires, there are no millionaires in Pakistan or in Asia? Go to them and say to them, you fund the next Twitter. You know, I want your funding for the next Twitter, the next Facebook, the next Instagram. And it need not be a Muslim thing, as Amin has said. You know, it can be a secular thing, but let it be in your hands. Let it be in a young Pakistani's hand. Let it be in a young Syrian's hand, let it be in a young Nigerian's hand, let it be in a young Venezuelan's hand, you know. But let's make our own platforms, and let's do something else. Let's also make our own films, because culture is important. Culture is so important. Please look back to Friends, which is a show all of us have watched. What did we hear on Friends? Oh, I was in Israel at a kibbutz. Oh, on Yom Kippur, blah, blah, whatever. It's not innocent, it's not accidental, this is on purpose. So make your own shows and tell our stories. Tell our stories, talk about our holidays, talk about our traditions, talk about our history. Write your own book. You know, all this is so valuable. What I want to say to young people who want to be writers is that I'm part of a mentorship program called South Asia Speaks, where we try to encourage early career writers who don't have access to agents, who don't have access to publishers. So there are those of us who are trying to do this. But you're younger and you're more qualified than I am, and many others are. So take this into your hands. You don't like how Facebook works? Build your own. And count on the fact that we are not millions. We are hundreds of millions. In our country alone, we are the size of the United States almost, population-wise, okay? So add us to Indonesia, add us to Malaysia, add us to Kuwait, add us to South Africa, add us to Nigeria. We're more than half the globe. So there's no reason why we need Western institutions. Just to touch on your last point, I think Jewish Voices for Peace have been wonderful. I think I'm Not in Our Name have been wonderful. But, and I think we should work with them. I think absolutely we should celebrate them. They've been incredibly brave, and I've been really moved to see, Jewish elders at protests. But I know that they're also, not a great number either. And I think we should absolutely encourage them, and we should absolutely collaborate with them. But I think the world has moved past a certain point. And for us to keep moving, I think it's very important we talk to each other. We spend so much energy talking to the West, and we spend so much energy talking to others, and very little amongst ourselves. And we know that one of Israel's stated goals is destabilizing Muslim population. We know that because, as the lady earlier mentioned, they're at war at 7 fronts. They're bombing 7 countries. They're trying to use Shia against Sunni. They're trying to use, Gulf against Levant. They're trying to use India against Pakistan. They're trying to use all this stuff. And we have to be really conscious and cognizant of that. And our movement, whatever it is, our Twitter, our Facebook, should of course welcome Jews. We welcome Jews, have a special place in the heart of all Muslims. We have no animus towards Jews. We have no animus towards Christians. We're all people, we're all human beings. But I would love to see us really build something that everyone can be a part of. but really to kind of focus on the global south. That would be my interest. And global south isn't just Muslims, certainly. It would be secular. It would be the people who have been ravaged by the West, rather than, religions or ethnicities.
Fatima Bhutto, Amin Hashwani, thank you very much. And a big
Thank
hand
you,
for our
Omar.
organizers, the Dear Palestine
Thank you
movement,
so much.
and to our common friend Tanya Zafar Khan.
Thank you, TVK.
Thank you all for coming. And here's to building
Thank
the
you
next
so much.
Facebook, but only better. Thank you.
Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah.
Bye, Fatma.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We've gone off. Sorry about that. What's your question? Maybe Amin can get it. Yeah, maybe Amin or I can answer it. Why don't you take a shot?
My name's Hadi, so I want to ask that over the past few decades, that how has the siege affected Gaza's economy and social structure, and how has it affected employment, migration, public health, and the general resilience of the Palestinian society?
So, can we get a mic over here?
Did you know that per capita highest PhDs in the world was in Gaza and in the West Bank? They're one of the most educated people in the world. Did you know that? You see all the poets who died, right, who were targeted by Israel, the engineers, the doctors, all of them were indigenous. So the Palestinians, as people, as survivors, like the Jews post, especially the Holocaust, or the anti-Semitism, so they are survivors. Palestinians are also Jews 2.0. They're survivors. They're strong. If you see in Gaza, like I said earlier on, despite of all of them being massacred, none of them ran away. Okay, like I said, in the hospitals of Egypt, they wanted to go back to Gaza. They said, we're going to die here, right? So they have a high population growth rate, but they educate each and every one of them, right? And they go to PhD levels. Therefore, Israelis destroyed all the universities in Gaza. There was a reason for that. So I'm saying that, while they're going through a lot, but I'm confident they will bounce back, right? They will bounce back because they have the fundamental ingredients as a society, right? So even any country, any nation needs the fundamental things: civil society, education, health, etc., etc. They were accused, Hamas was accused that you spend billions of dollars in building tunnels. That was absolute nonsense. If they had built in tunnels, how did these universities came? How did these schools came? How did the health facilities, all of these hospitals came? So I have a lot of hope in the Palestinians. But, globally, I think OIC and Muslim Ummah, in my opinion, is a myth. Nations operate on self-interest. Unfortunately, OIC, each and every member without exception, does that, right? So I think Palestinians will have to survive. And like I said, post-October 7th, post-genocide, there's a huge opportunity over here. It's like 9/11, right? So we can really, really roll up our sleeves, engage amongst ourselves. Like Fatma, she said, the South, I love that. We need to engage with African. There's an entire continent that's going to come up now in the next 25 years. It has the highest growth rates in the world. So we need to start engaging. But I'm telling you, just being on Facebook, social media, socializing too much, if you really want change, we need to learn from the Jewish community. You'll never find Jews in casinos or driving Ferraris, right, on Oxford Street. I mean, they put in their money for their education, music, hospitals, institutions.
The arts.
We need to do exactly that. And unfortunately, we really do not do that. So, it's fine to criticize, but I think as Rumi said, first I was clever, I wanted to change the world. Now I'm wise and I'm changing myself. So if you want change in Gaza or in Pakistan or the world, begin with your own self. Every morning, get up, look at your face in the mirror and say, what have I done today or what I'm going to do today to make a difference? Okay?
Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Amin. You've been a tremendous support and inspiration for our youngsters here. Thank you, Umar. Thank you so much for facilitating this. And thank you to Fatma. Immense gratitude for her taking the time to be with us. Now, the youngsters who've shown up and will hopefully bring more and more of your friends to the following. Thank you for being conscious of decent and effective ways of making the world more right, less wrong, sooner than later, than us. Folks, before we disband, I must make mention and give thanks to a few more. Once again, Amin, thank you for letting us use this space. It's incredibly generous. Yes. That's just lovely. I thank you so much, Rania, I believe. Yes, thank you, Rania. Lovely of you. Thank you to Danish Lakhani for powering us with Storm Fiber. Sara Tahir Khan and STK Productions, a huge thank you for enabling sound and tech. Special shout out to Umair and Alamgir. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Mariam Akbar Ali of Hobnob. And once again, Rania Hashwani for the delicious sweet treats. Fahim Jafar, so grateful for the coffee. Please make your way to finishing what's left. And finally, the dear parents behind Dear Palestine. This is my rap. Bilal Maheen, Basma Afshin, Fraini Sanam, Kulsum Mariam. Thank you for sticking to starting something. Thank you and good night and only love for Palestine.